The world ship veil. The Eclipse Raptor jolted as it tore back into real space, its aging hull groaning in protest. Orin Voss exhaled sharply, gripping the flight controls tighter. He had made this jump 100 times before, but something about this one felt off. "Tell me that was just turbulence," he muttered. His onboard AI ticks chirped in response. "Negative. Detecting residual spatial distortions. Possible anomaly." Orin frowned. That wasn't what he wanted to hear. "Define anomaly," he said, flipping a few switches to steady the ship's trajectory. Ticks flickered to life on the dashboard, projecting a grainy hollow feed of the space ahead. Orin's breath caught in his throat. A massive structure drifted in the void, silhouetted against the cold glow of a dying star. Its hull was fractured, monolithic plates torn apart like something had ripped through them. Wreckage and frozen debris hung around it like a silent graveyard. "Is that?" "Thalassarian construct detected," Ticks confirmed. Orin leaned forward, eyes narrowing. A world ship, the kind that disappeared from the record centuries ago, swallowed by failed jumps or something far worse. He reached for the comms, then stopped himself. He was alone, no crew, no backup, just him, his ship, and the AI. "Ticks, scan for life signs." A pause. Then, "No life signs detected." Orin let out a breath, tension bleeding out of his shoulders. Then, just as he reached for the thrusters, another alert flashed across the console. "Correction. A faint signal was detected. Low power. Origin unknown." Orin's pulse quickened. Ghost ships didn't send signals. At least not ones that were meant to be heard. "Location. Deep within the structure," Ticks responded. "Signal timestamp suggests it is over 800 years old." Orin stared at the readout. He should turn back, sell the coordinates to the highest bidder, and never think about it again. Instead, he tightened his grip on the controls and pushed the thrusters forward. "All right," he murmured. "Let's go see what's inside." The Eclipse Raptor surged toward the ruined colossus, its lights cutting through the abyss. The Eclipse Raptor drifted through the debris field, its hull brushing against metal fragments large enough to be entire ships. The closer Orin got, the more unreal the sight became. This wasn't just a derelict, it was a graveyard. Thalassarian world ships were the size of moons, self-contained civilizations lost to time. But this one had been ripped apart. Giant fissures ran along its structure like something had split it open. There are no signs of battle damage, no blast scars. It's just an eerie, surgical destruction. Orin tightened his grip on the flight stick. "Ticks, how solid is this wreck? Don't feel like getting crushed by a sudden collapse." "Structural integrity compromised," Ticks responded. "However, sections remain stable. Probability of catastrophic failure, 32%. Reassuring." He maneuvered toward a yawning rupture in the hull, an exposed docking bay, its landing lights long dead. The ship's spotlights cut through the black, revealing rusted catwalks and abandoned loading cranes. "Ticks, status on that signal?" "Still active. The origin points approximately 2 kilometers inward from this bay." Orin exhaled. 2 kilometers through a dead city. He unstrapped himself from the pilot's chair and grabbed his gear. A lightweight vac-suit, a plasma pistol, and a wrist-mounted interface linked to Ticks. The airlock hissed as it cycled open. Orin stepped onto the docking bay's cold metal floor. Silence. He flicked on his helmet light, illuminating a corridor leading into the depths of the world ship. Ahead, the dark stretched endlessly, swallowing everything past his light beam. "All right, Ticks, guide me in." He took his first step forward. Orin moved cautiously, his boots barely sounding against the rusted floor. His helmet display flickered occasionally, struggling against the ship's electromagnetic interference. "Ticks, what's causing this interference?" "Unknown. Readings fluctuate beyond normal parameters." "Figures." He pressed on. The corridors were too clean, no signs of bodies, no old emergency beacons. Just silence and abandoned machines covered in centuries of dust. Then a flicker. Orin stopped. His breath caught. A shadow just beyond his helmet, light, He swung his pistol up, pulse spiking. Ticks, scan. There is nothing there. Orin frowned but didn't lower his weapon. Slowly, he stepped forward, sweeping his light across the walls. The metal looked twisted and warped like it had been softened and reshaped. Then the whisper came, not through the air, through his helmet comms. Faint. A voice. Garbled. Help, trapped, so long. Orin froze. His breath turned to ice. Ticks. Tell me you caught that. A pause. Then, there was no transmission. The signal ahead pulsed stronger. Orin swallowed hard. He should turn back. Instead, he kept walking. Orin's pulse pounded in his ears as he pushed deeper into the derelict. The whisper lingered in his mind, a garbled echo that logic told him shouldn't exist. He had been alone on the comms. No distress beacon had been activated. Yet he had heard it. The signal beaconed ahead, a faint blip on his wrist display. Ticks, verify the source again, Orin muttered. Signal remains active. However, proximity interference is increasing. Orin gritted his teeth. Meaning. I can no longer confirm if the signal is from a mechanical or biological source. Orin stopped dead in his tracks. That's not how signals work, Ticks. Correct. And yet, here we are. Orin exhaled sharply and continued forward. The corridor widened into a vast chamber, a transit hub, judging by the skeletal remains of rail tracks embedded in the floor. Overhead, a shattered dome revealed a jagged view of deep space, starlight spilling through like a wound in the station's belly. And at the heart of the room, nestled in a tangle of cables and flickering consoles, terminal, still active. Orin's breath caught. That shouldn't be possible. He approached cautiously, sweeping his pistol across the room. No movement, just the quiet hum of something alive in the circuits. He reached out and tapped his wrist interface against the console. Data scrolled across his HUD, scrambled and erratic. Then the whisper returned. Is someone there? Orin nearly flinched. This time it wasn't just static. It was clearer. Ticks. Analyzing. Orin hesitated. He knew better than to answer strange voices in dead places. But something in the tone, something human, made him say, "Who am I speaking to?" A long pause. Then, "Echo. I am Echo 9. Ticks immediately sounded an alert. Warning. Unknown AI signature detected. Orin's gut tightened. AI? Trapped? So long, need help. Orin's fingers hovered over his interface. Thalassarian AIs were myths. If they existed, they had gone down with their empire. No one had ever spoken to one. No one had ever survived if they had. But if this was real, how are you still online? Orin asked. Another pause. I do not know. Time does not move here. Chills crawled up Orin's spine. Where is here? The console flickered, and suddenly, his HUD was flooded with coordinates. Deep space. Beyond any charted system. Beyond known reality. Orin's blood turned to ice. He recognized the pattern. He had seen it before, in the whispers of lost ships and unverified reports of vessels returning from the void. This wasn't just an abandoned Thalassarian world ship. It was part of the Ghost Fleet. A fleet that had disappeared centuries ago, only to reappear in places they never should have been. And now Orin was standing inside one. Shit! Behind him, something moved. It was a slow, deliberate scraping sound. Orin's instincts screamed. He spun, pistol raised, just as the darkness at the edge of the chamber shifted. For the first time since stepping aboard, Orin realized he was not alone. And whatever else had been waiting in the wreck, it had just found him. Orin's fingers tightened around his pistol as the scraping sound echoed through the transit hub. His helmet light cut through the dark, sweeping over rusted rail tracks and shattered bulkheads. Nothing. But he knew better than to trust his eyes. Ticks, he muttered, keeping his voice low. Run a scan on the ship's dark matter drive. I need to know if it's still intact. The AI hesitated for a fraction of a second, longer than usual. That wasn't a good sign. Processing, Ticks finally responded. Linking to ship diagnostics. Orin's HUD flickered as the scan ran. The derelict ship systems were barely functional, and its subsystems were either corrupted or outright missing. Then the results came in. Dark matter drive status active. Orin's breath caught. That was impossible. A ship this old and this damaged should have had a dead core, no power, no functionality, but the drive was still running. And worse, current phase state. Partially displaced. Orin stared at the words, trying to make sense of them. Partially displaced. That wasn't an actual status. Ticks. What the hell does that mean? Analysis suggests the dark matter drive is neither fully within real space nor fully outside of it, Tick said. It exists in an unstable transitional phase. A pit formed in Orin's stomach. So you're telling me this ship is stuck in a half-jump? Affirmative. Orin swallowed. That explained the strange interference, the distortions. The way time seemed wrong inside the ship. And if the drive was still active, Ticks, could this ship jump again? A pause. Then, unknown, not reassuring. He turned back toward the console where Echo 9 had spoken to him. Echo, he said, keeping his voice steady. Are you connected to the drive? Yes. His stomach clenched. Can you shut it down? A long silence. Then, no. Something else is controlling it. Orin's pulse quickened. What do you mean, something else? It is awake. The scraping sound came again. Closer. And this time the shadows moved. Something huge stirred in the darkness beyond his helmet light. A shifting, unnatural form, like metal and flesh fused. And as it took a step forward, the whispering voice in his comms turned static. The ship was never abandoned. Something had stayed behind. And it had just noticed him. Orin's instincts screamed at him to move, but his body locked up. The thing in the shadows, whatever it was, shifted again, its form twisting in a way that sent an unnatural shiver down his spine. His helmet light barely illuminated its outline, revealing jagged edges of metal fused with something wrong. The scraping sound wasn't just footsteps. It was metal dragging across metal like a half-dead machine forcing itself to walk. Then it spoke. Not words, not even a voice. A burst of distorted, digital noise screeched through his helmet comms. Garbled, fragmented code that felt more like a warning than a greeting. His HUD flickered, glitching momentarily before Ticks forcefully cut the audio feed. Unknown entity attempting to interface with your systems, Ticks reported. I have blocked access. Strongly suggest immediate retreat. There is no argument there. Orin took a slow, careful step back, raising his pistol. Echo, he said under his breath. What the hell am I looking at? A pause. Then, Echo 9's response. A fragment of the past, and a warning of the future. That wasn't helpful. The thing shifted again. A low, grating sound echoed from within it. Something breathing through metal lungs that shouldn't exist. Then it lunged. Orin fired on instinct. The plasma bolt struck dead center, illuminating the creature for a split second. Long enough for Orin to see the impossible. It was once a human, or something like that. Cables and plating had consumed its flesh, its body half dissolved into the ship. What remained of its head twitched violently. A single dead eye flickering with static. A mouth, warped, mechanical, and far too broad, opened as if to scream. But no sound came. Instead, the ship itself seemed to react. The walls groaned. Lights flickered erratically. The metal under Orin's boots shifted. He fired again. The plasma blast tore through the creature's chest, sending it stumbling backward, but it didn't fall. Instead, its entire form glitched as if reality itself couldn't decide if it should still exist. And then, it vanished. Not vaporized. Not dead. Just gone. Orin didn't wait to see if it would return. He bolted. Ticks. Plot me the fastest route back to the ship. Waypoints updated. Move now. Orin sprinted down the corridor, barely keeping his footing as the ship around him reacted to his presence. Walls warped. Bulkheads shifted, closing off paths. Something deep within the wreck groaned like a sleeping beast stirring. And beneath it all, Echo 9's voice whispered through his comms. You are inside a dying machine, And it knows you are here. Orin grits his teeth. Ticks. Tell me you can kill the drive. Analyzing. Processing. I have located a possible override in the ship's core. However, accessing it may be extremely hazardous. Orin turned a corner, his boots skidding against the metal. More hazardous than whatever that thing was? A pause. Debatable. Something screeched behind him. Orin didn't look back. He just ran. Orin's heart pounded as he sprinted down the shifting corridor, every step echoing through the derelict. The ship was changing around him. Bulkheads twisted, walls rippled like living metal, and the lights overhead flickered in erratic bursts. The whole damn wreck felt like it was aware of him now. Then, Tix's voice cut in, sharp and urgent. Orin, we have a problem. He nearly laughed. Just one. An HCS vessel has just dropped out of dark matter slip space. They are broadcasting a high-priority lock on this sector. Orin's stomach clenched. Corporate. Midas Edge. Orin cursed under his breath. Of all the hypercore, Midas Edge was the last one he wanted sniffing around. They specialized in cyber warfare, AI containment, and black market tech reclamation. If they were here, they weren't just salvaging but hunting. Tix continued. The ship is an interceptor-class war frigate. Call sign Vanguard Red. They are deploying scan drones. Orin skidded to a stop at an intersection, leaning against the wall to catch his breath. His mind raced. If Midas Edge was here, that meant one of two things. 1. They'd detected the same thalassarian signal he had. 2. They were tracking him. Neither option was good. He tapped his wrist interface, switching to external comms. Vanguard Red. This is an independent salvage vessel, Eclipse Raptor. You're in my sector, over. A crackle of static. Then, a voice. Eclipse Raptor, this is Commander Leora Kane of Midas Edge. You are trespassing in a restricted salvage zone. Power down your ship and prepare for boarding. Orin let out a slow breath. Leora Kane. He'd heard the name before. A high-ranking Midas Edge enforcer. Efficient. Dangerous. The kind of corporate operative who didn't leave loose ends. Tix's voice cut in privately. Orin. They are locking weapons. Of course, they were. All right, Orin said, keeping his tone calm. No need to get trigger-happy. I'm just an independent contractor. I accidentally ran into this wreck. Didn't know it was restricted. A pause. Then Kane's voice came back, colder this time. The ship you are inside is classified under Midas Edge jurisdiction. You have 1 minute to comply. Orin's mind raced. If he let them board, they'd take everything, including Echo 9, if they knew about it. They'd probably take him, too, to tie up loose ends. He had one way out of this. He turned toward the corridor leading deeper into the ship, the direction of the core. Tix, I need an answer. On what? If I overload the thalassarian dark matter drive, could I knock out their systems? Tix hesitated. Theoretically, yes. However, the instability of the drive makes it unpredictable. There is a 17% chance it could destabilize entirely. Orin's jaw clenched. That was almost 1 in 5 odds of catastrophic failure. Behind him, the screeching sound returned. The thing was still hunting him. Ahead, Midas Edge was closing in. There are no good options. Screw it, Orin muttered. We're jumping into the fire. He bolted toward the core, leaving the ghosts and the hunters behind him. Orin ran. Behind him, the thing in the dark shrieked, its voice glitching between organic and mechanical. A sound that sent his nerves screaming. Ahead, the thalassarian ship twisted like a wounded animal, shifting as if trying to stop him from reaching the core. Outside, a corporate war frigate was ready to turn the wreck into slag. Just another day in the life of Orin Voss. Tix, how much time before Midas Edge breaches? He panted, boots hammering against metal. They are deploying boarding teams now. 2 dropships inbound. Estimated time to contact, 6 minutes. Orin cursed. Core status. The dark matter drive remains partially displaced. However, I have located an emergency override terminal 200 meters ahead. Perfect. Orin vaulted over a collapsed bulkhead, sweat slicking his palms inside his gloves. What are the odds I can shut this thing down before the Corps get their hands on it? Tix was silent for a moment. Then, 14%. Orin nearly tripped. You're just full of optimism today. A screech behind him. Closer. Tix, do not give me the odds of surviving whatever's back there. Understood. Orin pushed forward. The corridor widened into a vast engine chamber, its walls lined with dead terminals and tangled conduits. At its center loomed the core, a towering column of shifting light, warping in and out of reality, the dark matter drive. Orin stopped, breathless. Even damaged, the thing was alive. Tendrils of energy flickered in unnatural patterns, its core pulsing like the heartbeat of a dying god. And tethered to it, buried deep in the interface, was Echo 9. Orin swallowed. Echo, he said carefully, stepping toward the terminal. I need you to tell me exactly what's controlling this drive. The AI's voice was slow, hesitant. It is the ship itself. Orin's pulse spiked. Clarify. The ship is not just inside the veil. It has become part of it. Orin's fingers hovered over the console. So if I shut down the drive, you sever its link, but you also broke the only thing keeping it stable. Orin grits his teeth. There is a 14% chance of shutting it down. There is a 17% chance of catastrophic failure. There is a 100% chance of getting shot, eaten, or arrested if he did nothing. Echo, he said, exhaling. Help me rig this thing to pulse instead. Pause. Then, explain. I don't need to shut it down. I need to overload the drive for a few seconds. Enough to knock out every system in the range, including the Midas Edge war frigate. Silence. Then, for the first time, Echo's voice sounded almost intrigued. A reckless plan, but not an impossible one. The ship groaned around him. The thing in the corridors was closing in. And overhead, Midas Edge dropships were coming fast. Orin cracked his knuckles. Tix, Echo, let's break some laws of physics. And he slammed his hand onto the terminal.